Before us this evening is an item related to a project occurring on the Harrison Street in the 700 block. Project for Randy Atwood and Mary Jo Knowles, who I believe are here in the audience this evening with us. The project I'll describe a little bit here in just a moment, but it has a number of items associated with it with respect to public improvements, development agreements, things of that nature. So I'll kind of walk you through what that is all about. Starting out, help orient you just a little bit. This is the aerial map showing the vicinity of the project. Harrison Street, of course, here, running north-south, 7th Street to the north, 8th Street to the south. This red hatched area represents the property that is involved. Currently on the property there is an existing duplex on the south end right about here. The north end of the site had a single-family residence on it that has been removed and is the area that a new duplex is proposed. Give you a couple of street level shots from good old Google Earth. This is at the intersection of Harrison and 8th Street. The existing duplex that I mentioned on the south end of the property is right here. And then the property extends to the north up into this area. This is the Harrison Street frontage. Just one item of note here I just want to mention because it will come into play a little bit later in the discussion. You'll notice here, it's a little hard to see on the screen, but there is a bit of a grade break from the street level. It drops off quite a bit down to the level of the house set back off the street. So there's a bit of an elevation change that occurs there, sloping away from the street down to the structure. That'll come in a little bit later in our discussion with relation to sidewalk placement. This is kind of a mid-lot view, if you will. This is taken from Harrison looking west. So again, the existing duplex here on the left. The single-family house, I believe, was this structure, which is now gone. New duplex proposed in this general location. And then one more shot. This would be from the north end, looking back towards the south. There's the duplex. This is the existing city alley located to the north of the parcel. The new duplex would be in this area. As you can see, Harrison Street is less than fully developed street section. It was a gravel roadway, and then the city applied some grindings to it here in the last several years, so it looks a little better today than it did then, but it's still lacking curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and really full-depth street improvements and utilities for storm drainage that are associated with that. Driveway approaches, all of those features are not yet constructed along the street section of Harrison, and this actually runs for a number of blocks north and south, from really 6th Street down towards State Highway 8. It is pretty much in this similar condition all the way through there. This is a mock-up showing what the site is proposed to be. Again, the existing duplex, on the south end of the property, Harrison Street out here on the east edge, proposed second duplex along the north property area, some storage areas, a storage structure here with proposed parking, something like this. This is not an exact replica at this stage, but it kind of represents what the layout of the property would be. One of the issues that has brought forward this topic to the council tonight is the discussion of the public improvements that would be required as part of this type of development. Anytime under our subdivision code requirements there is a principal structure, the principal building permit issued for a structure, such as a new duplex, then the public infrastructure that is adjacent to that parcel needs to be addressed. And so in this case, because Harrison Street is not fully developed, that type of an improvement would trigger the improvements requirement for frontage along the parcel. And so we'd be talking from essentially the southerly end, southeast corner of the property, working its way north to where the alley is and the end of the property, so along the frontage here. We would be looking at half-street improvements because it's not a completely improved street. So it would be curb, gutter, sidewalk, planter strip area, the paving for half the width of the roadway, and then any affiliated storm drainage that's necessary to make that drainage along that curb line work appropriately. So that is what the staff has discussed with the applicants with regard to what the public improvements would need to be associated with this particular development proposal. This is based on our adopted city standard for a local street, which is the 36-foot local street section. And that is 36 feet of pavement, full width. You'd obviously be looking at half width, the 8-foot planter strip, and the 5-foot concrete sidewalk to the one side, obviously the road section, and again, any storm system necessary to handle the drainage from the curb line itself. We'll be talking further about those improvements and a request from the applicant pertaining to those. Just before we step into that, I would like to mention one more item here, which has to do with that bit of topography I mentioned earlier in looking at the first photo. And again, we're looking at the existing duplex here. It sits down, several feet below the existing gravel road section at the south end of the property. That becomes an issue with respect to placement of a sidewalk. And one of the items that was discussed with the Public Works Finance Committee last week was the idea of allowing a removal of the planter strip in a portion of this frontage as these improvements move forward, generally in the area around that house. In that change in topography. The current adopted street standard calls for an 8-foot planter strip. That standard also has an allowance that the city engineer can approve a reduction in that planter strip to 5 feet, but that is as far as that authority extends. The city council then would be required to allow us to reduce that to something less than 5 feet, which in this case the suggestion is to go to really no planter strip for a short section right in that area. Yes,
Walter has a question on this.
Is the reason for that proposed or discussed reduction in planter strip is to preclude the need for a retaining wall?
That's essentially it. It is such a situation that it would require a retaining wall at the back of the sidewalk, depending on what the actual elevation ends up being. Could also require a hand railing along the back of the sidewalk on top of the retaining wall, just due to the potential for fall off the top of that wall. So it really just starts adding complication and cost to the project that, if possible, for a limited duration here, perhaps we could avoid.
Tom had a question, I guess, as well.
Do we know that the gravel grade or the grindings grade that currently exists for that block of Harrison, do we know that that's what the city would want the final paved portion of Harrison to be, at that level? You're showing us a picture of a grinding coated gravel street that connects two paved streets, but of course it bows through that one block. I'm just wondering, is if the city has a preference, would it maintain that same grade, or would it want to change that? In other words, when the city finally paves this street, will we keep it at that grade, or are we going to put it somewhere else, or do we know?
Okay. To start with, the short answer is no.
Okay.
We do not currently have a vertical alignment designed for that roadway. That is part of what we would be looking at with where this is going this evening in the presentation. The engineering staff would need to define what that alignment would be, vertical alignment of the roadway section. We are tied at either end, as you mentioned, to existing paved streets on 7th and 8th across Harrison. So those would be our point of connection at either end. The city staff, or in some fashion, the city would need to determine what that alignment needed to be, and then the applicant's designer would need to design the half street improvements to work with that alignment. And I'll come back to that in just a minute, if I may.
Okay, thanks.
Les?
Yes, sir.
We're talking about from the alley to the north all the way to the street to the south, correct?
That is correct.
But the area that is being developed is only going from the alleyway to the edge of where that existing duplex is, and yet we're going all the way to the top. Whose responsibility is it to go from the edge of what would be considered the proposed parking lot area to the street to the south?
In what we typically do is look at development in terms of the parcel. So it's the parcel frontage that has to meet the public improvement requirement. As I understand it, and Bill Belknap can correct me if I get this a little off, in order for the duplex proposed to be constructed on this site, there was a requirement that the parcel on which it sits, which you can see a green line right here, representing that northerly parcel, had to be combined with the southerly parcel, also owned by the applicant, in order to give them sufficient space to have that number of units in this zoning area. So in doing that, this in essence becomes one project parcel and one site, and then the entire site frontage has to be addressed as part of the development proposal. So it would include the entire frontage of this combined lot from the south end to the alley. Okay.
So what you're saying is that Atwood and Knowles would be responsible for putting something in front of somebody else's property?
They own both of those parcels, and it has been combined into one parcel under their ownership. All right, so there are a number of items this evening that we need to work on and address. First off, I want to mention that there was a previous application in 2003 to build a duplex at this location by this applicant. At that time, there was a request submitted by the applicant to waive the requirements for public improvement along that parcel frontage of Harrison Street. It did come to the City Council. The City Council chose to waive the paving portion of the improvement, so the asphalt section, but not any of the other components of the street section. So curb, gutter, sidewalk would still be required, or was going to be required at that time. That project did not proceed, and as I understand it, building permits were not issued, and the project essentially went away. So that was in 2003. And today, of course, 2014, the applicant has returned with essentially a very similar request for a project, and has also requested again that the city consider waiving all of the improvements required along the frontage, so curb, gutter, sidewalk, stormwater, and paving in its entirety. So that is the first item that will really be before the council this evening, to consider whether or not the council would choose to waive any or all of those improvement requirements. I can tell you the staff recommendation from Public Works staff is that the council deny that request, because this is in keeping with the requirements of the city code pertaining to frontage improvements associated with this type of development. This item did go to Public Works Finance Committee last week, and the committee did recommend that the paving portion be deferred, not waived, but deferred, and that the remainder of the improvements be constructed as part of the project. Now, that deferral would occur in the form of a payment in lieu of the construction. And the idea there is that does it make sense to pave half of that street section with the other half remaining gravel for an extended period of time, or does it make sense perhaps to go ahead and establish the curb line and the sidewalk through there in concert or connection with the 8th Street curb and sidewalk, but not do the paving portion at this time. So the committee recommendation was to defer the paving, but to require the rest of the improvements as outlined to you so far. So that would be the first item that I believe the council should probably address, whether or not the council desires to waive any or all of those improvements, and if not waive those improvements, is a deferral acceptable to the council as recommended by the committee. The second item is the development agreement. There's a draft development agreement in your packet this evening. It has been modified since the last meeting to reflect the recommendation of the Public Works Finance Committee. So it does include the deferral of the pavement construction through payment in lieu of construction. And then it has the requirements as is typically the case in our development agreements, for payment of security for the remaining public improvements if they are not going to be constructed immediately, and there's a desire to have the building permit issued. So it has that, and then it also sets a term for the construction of those improvements as 12 months, essentially the end of October 2015. So that's what's in the development agreement draft that's in your packet this evening. There's
Dan,
a
you want
question.
to ask a question on that?
So we've got two drafts development agreements. Is that the second one or the first one? The first
Second.
one in the packet order here.
Second.
It's the second. The original.
Yeah, this was going through the modifications late last week, and I believe the second one is the final version. Is that correct, Stephanie? Yes.
Scott just included the one that he brought to the committee initially,
All right.
along with the...
Okay, so it is the second one.
So it would be the second one that is in there.
So the first one was what they brought to the committee last
Went to
week, is that
committee.
what you're talking about? And then since then, there was a new one that was updated based on what the committee's recommendation was from last week?
That would be correct.
Walter, you had something on that? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Les, could you back up to the sketch showing the curb gutter sidewalk and tree lawn? That